how do you handle life when things go well? How do you do life when you're successful, and how does that go with your relationship with God? Because I want to say this, and I hope you understand this, and that success is a dangerous place to be spiritually. When you're successful, it's a dangerous place to be spiritually, especially when that success comes to you easily. So I pastored this church in Littleton, Colorado for almost 14 years, and for the first 9 some years of that, it was just the give and go, the tough grind. God would do great things. There were tough things, back and forth, little growth, and yet faithfulness of a lot of wonderful people, consistently preaching God's word, consistently worshiping, but just that, struggle all the time to see a breakthrough. And then all of a sudden there was a tremendous breakthrough, and God began to do incredible things. And we had tremendous growth and life transformation and baptisms. And I began to get calls from other pastors asking questions like, what's the key to your success? Like there's some button to push or some lever to pull. Right. And I would tell them, it's the Lord. Yeah. And they say, yeah, I know that. But beyond that, what's the key to your success? And I'm like, no, really, I mean it. It's the Lord. I was the same person before that I was after that started to happen. We were the same church before as after. God, for whatever reason, chose to put his favor and blessing upon this place. But I found I was treated differently when I became a pastor of a successful church than I was before. So maybe I'm more heightened to this issue than some would be, because it's easy to forget where you've come from when you got success. There is danger in forgetting where you've come from. And I want to give us an important biblical word that we find that's particularly important in the Old Testament, and that is the word remember. Remember, to think of again, to not forget. And throughout the Old Testament, you find this word remember, as God tells his people, remember, do not forget what I've done for you. And I want you to take your Bibles and turn them to the book of Deuteronomy, to chapter 6. It's your Old Testament, it's your 5th book in. Start at Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, and you'll get to chapter 6. And this is a very important section of the Old Testament, as Moses, who's the great leader of the Jewish people, he gathers together all of the people to give them specific instructions from God. Not just any instructions, but we find in chapter 5, he gives them the instructions of the 10 Commandments, teaching them how God wants them to live. We get to chapter 6, and he tells them the great commandment, that you are to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with everything you are. And then in the midst of chapter 6, he prepares them. Moses prepares them for what they're about to enter into, and that is into the promised land. All of a sudden, they're going to inherit all sorts of amazing things. Now remember, the Jewish people, if you know your Old Testament story, the Jewish people were slaves in Egypt for 400 years. 400 years. They were overworked, they were never paid, and at times treated brutally. They were miraculously released from this captivity due to the mighty hand of God, but then they wandered in the wilderness for an additional 40 years because they were lacking faith and they had fear, and they would not go into the promised land because of the enemies that were there. So now 440 years of generations that have languished and gone through difficult times, they're going to enter this land that God has promised them. It's like a person who has meager means about them, have had a really rough life. All of a sudden, a rich relative dies, and they find out that the inheritance has been left with them. And overnight, they're going to go from having almost nothing to walking into a mansion and a massive bank account for the first time. I mean, what would you tell a person like that? What instructions would you give to them? That's what Moses is getting ready to do for these people. And I want you to stand, if you would, as we read Deuteronomy chapter 6. We'll start with the first few verses, and later on we'll go farther from that. And when the Lord your God brings you into the land that he swore to your fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob to give you, with great and good cities that you did not build, and houses full of all good things that you did not fill, and cisterns that you did not dig, and vineyards and olive trees that you did not plant. And when you eat and are full, then take care lest you forget the Lord, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You may be seated. Get this. Here is what God is about to hand these people who slaves for 400 years and now wander in the wilderness for 40 years. He's going to hand them cities, multiple cities with complete infrastructures in place. He's going to hand them houses full of furniture and amenities, it appears. He's going to hand them cisterns or wells full of water. Think of the drought that we are in. They're given a land filled with water. And on top of that, crops full of food, vineyards and orchards already filled with food. He's going to hand it all to them. He's going to meet all their needs immediately and completely. My dad is a retired CPA, an accountant, and he had a lot of wealthy clients. And one of the things he sat me down once and shared with me his view of inheritances. And he told me that he's seen a lot of his clients hand over huge sums of money to their children, and how it actually hurt their kids, didn't help their kids. And so he went on to tell me of the small percentage of his worth that I would be receiving someday. And my siblings, seriously. And most of what he has will be given away to Christian organizations. Because he saw that sometimes if you just get handed a lot, it could actually do more harm to you than good. Moses says, you're going to walk into a land where you're going to be handed everything. And he tells them in these instructions, if you caught it, he says, you're going to get great and good cities that you did not build. Yes. Houses full of all good things that you did not fill. Yes. Cisterns, wells that you did not dig. And vineyards and olive trees that you did not plant. Right. Moses tells them, you have done nothing, and God's going to hand over everything fully ready for you because you're his children, because you're his people. Sometimes we think that our success is because of us, right? Well, look at me. I got diplomas on my wall. I worked hard. Or look, I'm skilled at what I do. I have incredible talent. And we forget it. Even all of that is a gift from God. That's right. Our success is a gift from God. Notice that Moses says here at the end of verse 11, the beginning of verse 12, and when you eat and are full, take care lest you forget the Lord. Let me say that again. And when you eat and are full, then take care lest you forget the Lord. Or a modern translation of that, which are my words, and when you become successful, be careful because you are in danger of forgetting God. You know what it's like to be full. You have Thanksgiving dinner and you're full beyond what you should be. What do? You don't go out and run. You go sit and watch a football game. You become lethargic. You don't have passion at that time. You just kind of sink into the couch when you're full. When you're full, you start to have entitlement. I deserve this. I worked hard for this. I've arrived now. When you're full, you can get a critical spirit if you're not careful and start to think of yourself better than others who obviously are not as full as you are. They must not work as hard. They must not be as smart. and they begin to be full of themselves and not full of the Lord. And when we are full, we can forget where we've come from and think that the reason that we're in such a good place is because of ourselves. We don't remember our past and what God has done to provide for us all that we have. If I can take the liberty for a moment to talk to middle-aged men in particular. I just have this one beef about your dear church here, and that is after the first service, a man was talking to me and he said, I'm assuming we're the same age. I said, I'm 52. He says, oh, I'm 62. So I'm not talking to that middle age. I'm talking to a younger middle age, all right? But I'm trying to get that out of my system. So, and if you're like on the younger side, you're saying, am I middle-aged yet? If you even ask that question, you are, all right? Welcome to the club. But a lot of times, middle-aged men in particular, and it can happen with women, but particularly with middle-aged men, they get to a point of success and they begin to let down their guard. They begin to think that they've arrived, and all of a sudden that they're entitled, and they let down their guard morally, and they let down their guard with their family, and they let down their guard spiritually and with the church, and they begin to think the world revolves around them, and they get sloppy with their life because of success. They worked hard, they've arrived, and they're the ones that now people go to versus them being hungry anymore. It's a dangerous place to be spiritually. So, what should we do about this? What does Moses say to these people, and what does God's word say to us about when we become full? Verse 13 of Deuteronomy 6. Moses says to them, "It is the Lord your God. You shall fear him, you shall serve, and by his name you shall swear. You shall not go after other gods, the gods of the peoples who are around you. For the Lord your God in your midst is a jealous God, lest the anger of the Lord your God be kindled against you, and he destroy you from off the face of the earth." He says, when you get handed all this stuff, here's what you need to do. He says to them, don't forget, but remember to, first of all, fear God. It is the Lord your God you shall fear, verse 13. Now, we like to talk about the love of God and the grace of God and the mercy of God and the compassion of God, and rightfully so, because he is all of those things plus. He's a God who forgives us. He's a God who gives a second chance. But he's also a holy God, and he's a righteous God, and he has standards against sin, and he wants us to be holy. And we're to fear him. Fearing God has the idea of a deep reverence and awe of him and his greatness and his grandeur. Right. And with that also comes knowing that he is a God of holiness, that he wants us to keep from sin. And we should have some level of proper fear of the consequences that go with getting on the wrong side of God. So let me give you an illustration of this. When I was in high school, I went to a movie with some of my buddies, my Christian friends from church, and we went to a movie. It's a thing called, if you can remember back to this, it was called a double feature. How many of you remember double features? All right. That means that you pay one price, but you get two movies, and there's an intermission in between. Some people still do that today. They're not supposed to, though. They just go from one theater to another. But back then, you could stay in one theater for two movies. And so the movie we wanted to watch was the first movie of the double feature, and it was PG. The second movie was R, rated R. And I wasn't allowed to see R-rated movies in the house I grew up in. And so I told the guys in advance that we can go to the first movie, but then we're going to have to leave because I can't stay for the second. They're like, that's fine, no problem. First movie finished, intermission came, and then all of a sudden the full court press from my buddies came. Come on, Mike, come on, let's stay for the second one. I'm like, I told you guys I can't do that. My parents won't let me do that, and my dad for sure, there's no way. And they're like, oh, your dad will be fine with it. I'm like, oh, no. You don't know my dad. He won't be fine with it. And one guy says, call him. He'll be, no problem. I'm sure. Just call him. I said, if I even call my dad and ask him to see a movie that's R-rated, I've already caused a lot of problems by even asking, because there's no way that that's going to be okay. And I said, you know what, I'll just go out to the car, I'll wait for you guys, you can watch it. And they're like, okay, Romberger, fine. And they all stand up and walk out and get in the car and all the way back to the, where we were. About 2 days later, a guy at school comes up to me that was part of that group, and he says, hey, Mike, I just want you to know I just appreciate what you did and how you, respected your dad and the, the standards that you guys have. No, that conversation never happened. It never, never took place. That's how the story's supposed to go, and it never happened. But I'm grateful for a dad who cared about my moral condition, and I had a healthy respect and honor, a fear of my dad, that I cared more about him and what could be on the other side of that decision than what my friends thought. That's what this is about. He says, when you get full, remember to fear God, to honor him, respect him, have reverence for him, and live in such a way that you'll be in a right relationship with him. Secondly, he says, don't forget, but remember to serve God. To serve God. Verse 13, him you shall serve. God built us to serve him. He's gifted us and empowered us to do so. And here's the thing, we're never more fulfilled than when we're serving God. It's amazing. When we are serving him, it doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but it's how God built us and made us to serve him. When I was graduating from college, I was just taking a summer off in between to get ready for seminary. I was going to start seminary just 3 months later. And back in those days, I figured out financially, I needed a job that paid $5 an hour to get me through the summer. I was going to be living in a house with some other guys. It wasn't very expensive. And I just needed and back then, $5 was kind of minimum wage. And so I'm walking out of I went to Biola University. I was walking out of the cafeteria about 2 weeks before school ended, and it had a sign I was walking out that said, custodial summer positions open $5 an hour. I'm like, there we go. And so I signed up, and I got interviewed, and I got accepted. And so Saturday I graduated, and Monday I showed up to work this new job. And I had, thoughts of grandeur. I'm going to ride around in those little carts, and I'm going to blow stuff and all that. And they kept giving jobs to everybody in the room that morning as they were, getting our jobs for the entire summer. So what you were given, you would do for the entire summer. Nobody was going to change. And there was down to 2 guys left, me and a guy named Mark. And they said, the 2 of you guys, this is your job for the summer. Your job is to deep clean all of the dormitory bathrooms. Did I mention college dormitory bathrooms? That's with the stone, that's with the razor blade, that's with the chemicals, that's with the rubber gloves. Every day for 3 months, hands and knees in showers, toilets, sinks. And then it was time after all of that to have lunch break, and we went walking on the campus, and I was by myself, and I'm like, I can't believe that this is going to be my summer. And I'm walking by one of my old professors who's walking by. He goes, hey, Mike, how you doing? I'm like, well, not so great. He goes, well, what's up? And I told him about my morning, and he smiled. He said, Mike, if you can do this with all your heart for the Lord, he can use you to do anything for him. I've never forgotten that comment from him. So I try to make the best of my summer. Mark and I, when people ask us, what do you do for your summer? And say, hey, we're professional bowlers. Mm-hmm. We're ringleaders, Listen, when you serve God with all your heart, you cannot be full of yourself because you're full of serving him. And so Moses says you need to fear God, you need to serve God. He says don't forget, but remember to, thirdly, follow God. Follow God. You shall not go after other gods, it says. Look again and look at verse 14 again of chapter 6 of Deuteronomy. Moses says, you shall not go after other gods, the gods of the peoples who are around you. For the Lord your God in your midst is a jealous God. Lest the anger of the Lord your God be kindled against you. And he destroy you from all the face of the earth. This is big. You're to follow God. You shall not go after other gods. He's a jealous God, meaning he demands to be first priority in our life. Idolatry is placing something in God's place. Notice Moses' words in verse 14 is, you shall not go after other gods, the gods of the peoples who are around you. You might look around and you say, there's not gods around here. There's no little idols, little statues all over the place. You sure about that? Idol is placing something in God's place. What are the gods of the people around us? Well, I just moved here from Colorado. Let me tell you one of the gods of Colorado. It's also one of the gods of where I now live too. And that's recreation. Now, recreation is a wonderful thing, right? God made the creation and it's beautiful, but if you live for it, if that's all you want to do, you don't even hardly come to church anymore because you're out recreating all the time. It becomes a god for you. Some, and especially in the area I live now, Santa Cruz County, one of the gods is the environment, where birds and fish and streams are more important than people. Or where you live, one of the gods of this area is technology. I mean, this is the technology hub of the world. And it's become a god for a lot of people. You know, a new iPhone comes out. How long is the line to get the new? It's just like the lines to go to church on Sunday mornings around here, right? The god of technology. Or the god of a career, where we put our career first. Or, if I could be so bold as to say, the god of children. I mean, our children need to be a high priority, but sometimes they become our first priority. And everything else is subservient to their lives and their happiness, when it should be number one is God. Or knowledge, or relationships. The list goes on. Politics. You know, people they live and breathe it. They get upset about it. They think about politics all the time. They think politics somehow is going to save the union. It hasn't yet. Or sports. I love sports. By the way, just to be accurate biblically, you need to know that nowhere in the Bible is anything positive said about a giant. You just need to know that. Sorry, I grew up in LA, I just had to say. A lady came up to me after the first service and says, yeah, but there's so many Christians on the team. I said, I know, those good guys. And you've won all sorts of championships. I know. It's sickening. So, and another god? Ministry. Ministry can become a god, where it's all about ministry, but not about the God of the ministry. Yeah. The gods of the people around us. And when we see God as he truly is, in all of his majesty, and all of his glory, and all of his grandeur, it will cause us to want to follow him. See, these three go together. Fearing him, serving him, following him. When you follow him, you can't follow yourself. You can't be fully in charge because you're following him. No matter how successful or how good things are, when you follow him and serve him and fear him, it keeps you on the right track. So I want to read for you a passage from Revelation chapter 5 about following this amazing God. Listen to these words in Revelation chapter 5, verses 11 through 14. Then I looked, and I heard around the throne and the living creatures and the elders the voice of many angels, numbering myriads of myriads and thousands of thousands, saying with a loud voice, "Worthy is the Lamb who was slain to receive power and wealth and wisdom and might and honor and glory and blessing." This is the throne of God. And I heard every creature in heaven and on earth and under the earth and in the sea and all that is in them saying, "To him who sits on the throne and to the Lamb be blessing and honor and glory and might forever and ever." And the four living creatures said, "Amen." And the elders fell down and worshiped. Follow God, this great God. Fear God, serve God, follow God. One of the things I like that what you do here is you have this connection card. I want you to take it out if you would. Because so often we'll have a gathering like this and then we leave, get in the car, and it's all forgotten. But to take a few moments and to actually take some time to respond in that bottom right box, my response to the message. Here's what I want you to respond to today. Respond to this. Where do I need to get realigned in my life so that I can fear God, serve God, follow God? Where do I need to get realigned in my life so that I can fear God, serve God, and follow God? Write down something very specific. And then this week, bring that every day before the Lord.